While survival shaped me, it no longer gets to define me. Hello, family, and welcome back to Vibe Check. Today's episode is for the ones who are finally beginning to feel a shift. Maybe you've been working through something painful for a while, and while the wound isn't gone, it's not quite bleeding the way it used to. This episode is a reflection on that tender in-between space, the space where you're not quite broken, you're not quite healed, but you're present, you're conscious, and you're learning every day. So now I want to ask you the question that's been echoing in my mind for over a year now. Who are you without the wound? And I don't mean that in a bypassy, get over it kind of way. I mean it more so in a way that is reverent and curious, in a spirit knows you're ready now kind of way. I really just wanted to take it back to the early days of Vibe Check, like it's me and you having a conversation. And so that's what we're going to do today. So first, let's back up to the end of 2022 when I started having panic attacks. If you've heard me tell this story or you follow my writing, then you know that these panic attacks started seemingly out of nowhere. By early 2023, I started working with a new therapist, and I came to understand something that I had known but hadn't quite fully integrated, which was the fact that my panic was rooted in trauma. So it really wasn't random at all. It was a years long buildup of unprocessed pain from 2015 onward, now demanding to be held. Now, therapy wasn't new to me. I had done therapy before. My therapy journey started in 2018 as a way to process the events that are the root of the panic I experience today. But as we all know, healing is not linear, and trauma really does have timing of its own. What I came to find, and what you might have experienced, is that sometimes it waits until your body feels safe enough to fall apart, which feels like really ironic and counterintuitive. But I'm not here to retell the trauma. I am here to say that something sacred happens after the rupture. And once you have sat with the grief, once you have sat with the wound, once you've given it a name, the fog starts to clear. And you're left with this question of, who am I now? Because while survival shaped me, it no longer gets to define me. Let's be really honest though, because there is comfort in familiarity, even when the familiar is painful. And when you've been in survival mode for years, peace can feel suspicious. Peace can feel foreign. You may feel like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. And sometimes growth doesn't feel like growth. It can feel like something is missing. Like for me, the question is, if I'm not the person who's always anxious, and if I'm not the person who's always bracing and always hyper aware, then who am I? And this is the emotional integration that I really want to dive into, because I feel like it's the part of healing that does not get enough attention. The part where we relearn ourselves, not as this wounded being, not as the hyper vigilant version of us that did what they had to do, but as the person who's still here and who is still soft and is still full of possibility, even after everything they've been through. I also want to name something very important. When I ask, who are you without the wound? I am not suggesting that you can or should just leave it all behind, because for so many of us, especially if you're Black, brown, queer, trans, chronically ill, fat, neurodivergent, insert, the very systems that created many of these wounds, or at least are a root cause of them, are still very much active. And unfortunately, while it would probably be a lot easier, we don't get to heal in a vacuum. We carry trauma in our bodies, and we live in a world that continues to trigger it. A world that politicizes our bodies, a world that punishes our softness, that doesn't always offer safety, even when we've done all the inner work. So this conversation is not about erasure by any means. It's not about moving on. This conversation is about recentering, because reclaiming who we are beyond the wound means saying, I am more than what happens to me. Hey, family. So I wanted to take a second to come back on camera and pause here because I am editing this video and I felt it was really important to say this out loud, especially as a domestic violence survivor myself. When I speak in this episode about exploring who we are without the wound, I want to be really clear that it's not to say the harm we've experienced doesn't matter. And it is not to minimize the very real violence, grief, or erasure that many of us have known. This is simply an invitation, an offering to explore who we are when we're not only living from that place, who we get to be beyond survival. It is a reflection on the growth that happens after the growth, after the therapy, after the breakdowns, after the breakthroughs, however healing has looked for you. And it also honors that healing is ongoing, even if we're in a better place now. So in this moment, specifically in this video, I am speaking to the reality that so many of us, especially if we're marginalized, especially if we're Black, brown, queer, neurodivergent, etc., we're still healing in systems that haven't caught up to our liberation. And that can be hard. That can be activating. And so if you need to pause, if you need to take a breath, if you need to come back to this video later, I deeply honor that. And I want you to hear this too. You are not what happens to you. You are not broken. And your healing is not invalidated by the fact that the world isn't always gentle. This work is not about erasing the wound. This work is about honoring it while gently making room for the rest of you too. And if you're still in the thick of the storm, know that this video can wait for you and you don't have to rush your healing. Okay? I'm sending you so much love. And now let's jump back into the video. It means holding space for the daily microaggressions, the institutional gaslighting, the exhaustion of being asked to be resilient when what we really need is relief, especially right now, right? With everything happening under this administration, the stripping away of rights, the criminalization of rest, the constant noise of a world trying to silence our truth, our healing becomes not just personal, but political. I mean, everything is political, but that's besides the point. Choosing to explore who we are outside of the pain, that's not avoidance. That is resistance. That is reclamation. Because we're not here to be reduced to our wounds. We are so much more than them, right? We are here to live in our wholeness. We are here to feel joy and beauty and creativity, pleasure and liberation, even in a world that tells us that we haven't earned it. So if you've ever felt like healing was supposed to mean being over it, please hear me when I say that you can be healing and still be hurting. You can be evolving and still be impacted. And none of that means you're doing it wrong. So we have just entered summer. We are halfway through the year, and I find that this is such a potent portal of recommitment and reflection, right? We are halfway past the time that some of us may have set revolutions. Well, revolutions, sure. We're at the halfway point. You know, it's a portal of recommitment and reflection. And if this year's first eclipse season left you raw, I mean, you're still feeling the residual effects of of it, or if you are reparenting your inner child, or if you are in a chapter of identity reimagining, many of us are going through that. And I just want to name that this moment isn't about fixing yourself or like doing this drastic revamp of how you show up in the world, but it's more so about meeting yourself, because this is where transformation lives. It's within. It doesn't live in the high vibes or the perfection. It lives in the quiet and messy and holy work of returning to yourself. So, what actually helps us move through this phase of healing? What helps us move through the part where the wound softens, but the world is still loud? A few practices that have supported me in redefining who I am beyond survival are journaling, inner child check-ins, and mirror work. These aren't one-time fixes, but they're ongoing invitations that you might find to be supportive too. So let's talk through them for a moment. Journaling for me is like a ritual of reintroduction. And we talk about journaling a lot, but I want to offer a new frame and ask, what if journaling wasn't just about reflection, but about reintroduction? And so looking at it through that perspective, you might try something like writing to yourself as if you're meeting yourself again, and make it a conversation like, hey, I know we've been through a lot and I'm just here to get to know who you are now. You might even try starting a page with something like, I used to think I was blank, but I'm realizing that I'm actually ... Or even something as simple as, today I felt most like myself when I was blank. And maybe it was an activity that you were doing, or maybe you felt most like yourself when you were talking to a particular person, or when you were expressing yourself in a certain way. I just find that doing check-ins like this with myself, even if it's on the go and it's just in my mind, they really help me to notice the subtler shifts. They really help me to notice the new voice emerging that isn't rooted in fear, but rooted in truth. And so this sort of journaling is really more so about witnessing your becoming. And my favorite part about this type of journaling is that when I look back on my entries years later, because I actually have kept every single journal I've owned since 2012. That sounds kind of crazy, but it's really cool to see how far you've come and how much you've learned. And, maybe there was something you were going through that you thought that you'd never get through. And then you look back and you're like, whoa, that is like a distant memory now. You know what I mean? So try that out. Inner child check-ins. So we all talk about reparenting ourselves and inner child healing. And I want to look at this as reparenting your power. I often think of ways that I can reframe my anxiety in the moments that I'm feeling anxious. And one of the most profound shifts that I've recently had came when I thought about asking myself, what if I don't need to calm down, right? Like, what if I pause and ask my inner child, what are you afraid will happen if I fully take up space right now? The answer for many of us might be that we're afraid we'll get hurt again. And whew, if that's not super relatable, right? And so instead of pushing your inner child aside, maybe start speaking to them more often. Maybe try letting them know that you don't have to protect me anymore. I've got us now. Inner child work isn't just about soothing. It's about rebuilding trust with yourself. It's telling the younger you that you were right to be scared, your fear was valid, and now you're safe to expand. Mirror work. This is something that I like to do at my altar in particular. I actually have a mirror on my altar space. It's really powerful for the moments when I just need to have conversations with myself as well. So I think many of us try to avoid the mirror when we're in a spiral or we're crying because it's really hard to see yourself in that state. But I have found it to be a really potent way to come home. And I don't mean just for affirmations, but to really just look into my own eyes and let them soften and let them tell me what it is that they're feeling. To say, hi, you're still here and I see you. You can try this, and some days you might cry, some days you might laugh, some days you might feel really weird, some days you might not feel much at all, but it's honest. And when I do this, it's mine. It's my sacred time, and it's kind of like a sacred reunion. So try it out, maybe just 30 seconds to a minute, no script, just your gaze and your presence, and see what happens. And afterward, if it feels good, maybe write down what you noticed. Write down what surprised you. Write down what you saw. And it doesn't have to be deep. It just has to be honest. One thing I also want to touch upon is embodiment, because making safety felt, I think, is a key part of this. Sometimes we forget that healing has to be felt in the body and not just intellectualized. So for me, as an example, embodiment has looked like taking 2 minutes to stretch my body in the morning, or to move my spine, or to go and walk barefoot in the grass outside, assuming the weather allows, because we're in that time of the year in South Florida where sometimes you wake up and it's pouring rain. For you, it might be pressing your feet into the floor during an overwhelming moment and just whispering, whoops, and just whispering to yourself that we are here. We are safe. Because even when the world outside doesn't feel safe, you can give your body a moment of anchored presence. And what happens is that moment becomes a portal to peace, to power, to possibility, to all the things. If there's one thing that I would love for you to walk away with today, it's that healing is integration. It is, as I always speak about here on this channel, allowing the grief and the joy to coexist. It is about remembering that your softness is not a weakness, but a return. And this is why I say it's not about getting over the wound. It's about growing beyond its grip. And that's where liberation lives. This whole month, and I can't believe the month has gone by this fast, but this whole month we've been talking about living in full color. And this right here is what it means to live beyond grayscale and to reclaim your full emotional spectrum. To be vibrant, not in spite of what you survived, but because of who you've become. So if no one has told you lately, you are allowed to evolve. You are allowed to be joyful without apology. And you are allowed to put the pain down, not because it didn't matter, but because you matter more. So let's reflect together and let me know in the comments what comes up for you. Who are you without the wound? What identity are you ready to release, and which one are you ready to reclaim? And what's one way you're tending to your becoming right now? Let's speak life into this journey. Share this with someone that it may resonate with. Not only does it help this channel grow, but it helps the message reach the folks who need it most. And if this resonated, you might want to watch this next. It's a guided meditation for sacred worth and full expression, and it would be a beautiful companion to this message. As always, thank you so much for being here, for showing up for yourself, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye, guys.